Tonight's investigation begins with a debate that quickly spread across the global media landscape. Two journalists, two very different perspectives, and one extremely sensitive question. How should the world discuss war, terrorism, and responsibility without falling into propaganda, political pressure, or emotional manipulation? In a widely discussed exchange, American commentator Tucker Carlson and British journalist Piers confronted each other over some of the most controversial issues in modern geopolitics. Their debate touched on the war in Gaza, the role of Hamas, U.S. foreign policy toward Iran, and the broader question of whether media narratives sometimes shape public opinion more than facts. But beyond the viral clips and heated exchanges, there are deeper historical and political questions that deserve careful investigation. Tonight, we step back from the noise and analyze the debate itself. What claims were made? What historical facts support or challenge them? And what does this argument reveal about how modern media discusses conflict in the Middle East? This is not about taking sides. It is about understanding the full story. The exchange began with a question that often appears in discussions about the Middle East. Do you consider Hamas a terrorist organization? In many countries, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and the European Union, Hamas is officially designated as a terrorist organization. That classification is based largely on Hamas attacks targeting Israeli civilians since the group emerged during the late 1980s, particularly during the First Intifada. However, Hamas is also a political movement that governs the Gaza Strip after winning the 2006 Palestinian legislative elections, a victory that surprised much of the international community. This dual identity, militant group and political authority, is one reason debates about Hamas often become complicated and highly charged. In the interview, the discussion quickly moved beyond labels. Instead, it turned toward a broader moral question. Is the killing of innocent civilians ever justified? The argument that followed would challenge not only how terrorism is defined, but also how governments justify military actions during war. During the debate, Carlson emphasized a moral framework that many political philosophers have discussed for centuries. The idea is simple. Deliberately killing civilians is wrong, regardless of who does it. This argument echoes principles found in international humanitarian law, including the International Committee of the Red Cross Guidelines on Armed Conflict. These rules are based on the principle of distinction, the obligation to differentiate between combatants and civilians. Civilian protection is also embedded in the Geneva Conventions, which form the legal backbone of modern wartime ethics. But applying those principles in modern conflicts is often extremely difficult. Wars today frequently take place in densely populated urban environments, where militant groups operate among civilian populations. The Gaza conflict is one of the most controversial examples. Israel argues that Hamas embeds military infrastructure within civilian areas. Human rights organizations, however, have repeatedly raised concerns about civilian casualties resulting from Israeli military operations. This reality creates a difficult and emotionally charged debate. And that is exactly where the discussion between the two journalists intensified. One of the most controversial claims raised in the debate involved the idea that Israel indirectly allowed funding to reach Hamas in earlier years. This claim is often misunderstood, so it requires careful explanation. Several Israeli officials and analysts have acknowledged that, during the 1980s and early 1990s, Israeli authorities tolerated or allowed certain Islamic charitable organizations in Gaza to operate. At the time, these groups were viewed as a potential counterweight to the secular nationalist movement led by Yasser Arafat and his organization Palestine Liberation Organization. Those Islamic networks later evolved into what became Hamas. Historians and Israeli analysts have documented that this policy was not intended to create a militant movement, but rather to weaken rival Palestinian factions. Over time, however, the strategy backfired. Hamas developed into a powerful armed organization that carried out attacks against Israeli civilians and soldiers. This historical context is widely discussed in academic research and has been acknowledged by several former Israeli officials. Rather, it reflects a complex and controversial strategic calculation during a turbulent period of Middle Eastern politics. Another central theme of the debate involved media framing. Carlson argued that American media sometimes focuses heavily on foreign conflicts while paying less attention to domestic issues. Morgan challenged that claim, pointing out that international crises can directly affect global stability and American security interests. Both arguments reflect a long-standing debate within journalism itself. How much attention should news organizations devote to foreign conflicts compared with domestic problems? Since the attacks of September 11th attacks, American foreign policy discussions have often centered on counterterrorism and Middle Eastern geopolitics. At the same time, domestic issues such as immigration, economic inequality, and the opioid epidemic have also dominated public debate. News organizations must constantly balance these priorities. The exchange between the two journalists revealed how that balance can become politically charged. Another major topic in the debate involved U.S. tensions with Iran. Over the past decade, Iran's nuclear program and regional influence have remained major concerns for U.S. policymakers. The issue intensified during the presidency of Donald Trump, particularly after the United States withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2018. Trump later authorized the strike that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani, an event that brought the two countries dangerously close to direct conflict. Supporters of a hardline policy toward Iran argue that the country funds militant groups across the region and threatens global stability. Critics argue that escalation risks triggering a broader regional war. The journalists' debate echoed these larger disagreements about American strategy in the Middle East. Perhaps the most emotional part of the debate centered on civilian deaths in the Gaza war. According to various humanitarian organizations and international observers, the conflict has caused devastating human losses. Many of the victims are civilians, including women and children. These statistics are heavily disputed and politically contested, but the humanitarian toll is widely acknowledged. Organizations such as United Nations and Human Rights Watch have repeatedly called for stronger protections for civilians. Meanwhile, Israel argues that Hamas bears responsibility by operating within civilian areas and using infrastructure such as tunnels beneath residential neighborhoods. This tragic reality highlights the fundamental challenge of modern warfare. When militant groups and civilians share the same environment, distinguishing between targets becomes extremely difficult. And when civilian casualties occur, global outrage often follows. One of the most important takeaways from the debate is that modern wars are fought not only with weapons, but also with narratives. Information warfare plays a massive role in shaping public opinion. Governments, political movements, and media organizations all compete to influence how conflicts are perceived. Social media platforms have accelerated this dynamic dramatically. Videos, images, and commentary can spread worldwide within minutes, often without full context. This means the battle for public perception now unfolds alongside the military conflict itself. The debate between Carlson and Morgan became a viral example of this phenomenon. Each side's supporters viewed the exchange as a victory for their own narrative. But the deeper truth is that both perspectives reflect different political and moral frameworks. Ultimately, the most important question raised by the debate may not be about one journalist or one interview. It is about how democracies discuss war. Should citizens question foreign policy decisions made in their name? How much transparency should governments provide when military actions are taken? And how can journalists challenge powerful institutions while still maintaining fairness and accuracy? These questions have existed for generations. From the Vietnam War to the Iraq War, media debates have played a critical role in shaping public understanding of conflict. Today's digital era has only amplified that influence. The debate between Tucker Carlson and Piers Morgan captured a moment when media, politics, and geopolitics collided. But the deeper issues it raised remain unresolved. What defines terrorism? Who bears responsibility for civilian casualties in war? And how should journalists question power without becoming part of the political battle themselves? These are difficult questions with no easy answers. Yet, in a world where information moves faster than ever before, one principle remains essential. Facts matter, context matters, and thoughtful debate matters. Because understanding the truth behind global conflicts is not just a journalistic duty, it is a responsibility shared by all of us. If you found this investigation valuable, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this video so more people can explore these complex global issues with deeper context and facts. And if you want more investigative documentaries examining the stories behind international headlines, stay tuned for our next report. Thank you for watching.